Welcome to the roundtable. It's on building the perfect Web3. And today we will focus on globally decentralized blockchain infrastructure. Bit of a mouthful, but the aim of today is to share insight, advice, and best practice from industry insiders so that you can harness the right solutions to help your blockchain business become more successful. Now, we keep on hearing about blockchain, not least because it's growing at an eye-watering rate of over 50% every year. And estimates predict that growth will continue on that hockey curve this decade. And some of the conservative estimates I've seen, it's got them growing from $7 billion last year to $164 billion by 2030. Eye-watering numbers. Now, many businesses are thinking that this will be the spark for the next technological revolution. And so we're looking with interest at how this will, for example, create a new wave of the internet, the so-called Web3. Now, offset against this explosive growth is its consumption of enormous amounts of energy. So with the pressing environmental concerns, we need to figure out how to do it all in a green way. At its heart, it's all about providing tamper-proof, secure information for storage and transmission. And although most associate blockchain with cryptocurrencies, we've only just started nibbling away at the edges of how industries are actively adopting this technology. There are use cases littered across healthcare, media, transport, logistics, to name a few, and it's bound to shape our future. What OVH Cloud have noticed is that less attention is given to how blockchain platform or the infrastructure is deployed. So that's what this webinar is all about. We intend to give you insight and tips on how to establish the basics that can not only save you money, but satisfy business needs more effectively and enable your growth. We have 4 subject matter experts. They have a track record in delivering blockchain businesses and the all-important infrastructure that makes it successful. They're here to offer you practical insights and tips that have produced results for them. But like I said, you are in charge today, so take this opportunity to drive the direction of our discussion. Just submit your questions in Slido, and we'll do our best to answer them. So we've got a packed agenda. Now to our illustrious panel. Panel, I'm going to ask each of you to do a short intro and please share an interesting development in blockchain that's particularly impacted your company or you personally. So let's start with you, Radu.
Hey everyone, really happy to be here and share some of our experiences. My name is Radu. I'm one of the co-founders and in charge of product development at Beware Labs. My background is, as most of my colleagues in engineering used to work for big tech Web2 companies such as Google, Fitbit, or Oracle before. I started in Web3 in 2020, working for another infrastructure company at the time, and it's there where I met my co-founders. Our idea and the moment we decided to start Beware Labs was at the end of 2020 when there was a big Infura crash, which impacted the centralized exchanges and a lot of the other applications on the market back then, and we thought that there has to be a better way to bring true reliability to Web3. And we started thinking about a decentralized Infura or a decentralized API platform, and then we started building that. And that's how Beware Labs and then Blast, our decentralized infrastructure platform, took shape. So thank you for having me, and really happy to share some of our challenges, experience, errors, and successes with you guys.
Thank you, Radu. Over to you, Daniel.
First of all, I just want to thank the panelists for having this, putting this together, and especially OVH for stepping up and being very forward-thinking about the next iteration of the internet, the next iteration of technology. You guys are really ahead of the game here. I'm Dan Keller. I'm the co-founder of both Flux and Zelcore. I've been in this space longer than I care to remember. I've been in blockchain for many, many years. I come from a CIO level, C-suite. So I spent the first 25 years of my career centralizing everything. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career breaking it all back apart with decentralization. Flux is a decentralized compute network. So essentially, we are the world's largest and first decentralized compute network. We got 16,000 plus nodes all around the world. One of the big questions that we'll answer today, and one of the challenges, is what is Web3? Like, what is the true definition of Web3? And I think what you'll find today as we start to dive down that rabbit hole is its infrastructure. It's about providing infrastructure. So all the fancy things out there, the NFTs, the DeFis, the metaverses, you know, whatever it is, the soup du jour, AI, the AI components now, it's all going to have to run on a decentralized infrastructure, and that's exactly what Flux is doing. And they're partnering with logical partners like OVH to be able to provide Web 2 and Web 3 working together symbiotically.
Wow, thank you very much for those kind words, and you can come again. Right, over to you, Omar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys, for joining this amazing webinar and the opportunity to speak to a wider granule, supporting us in creating a large ecosystem of companies that can support blockchain innovation within the industry and supporting us as OVH Cloud in wider adoption of these ecosystem further. Now, I would like to give maybe a more personal touch into introduction. Now, what did I do and what happened to me that I became, passionate about blockchain? In 2016, I've been exposed first time into blockchain. I saw all the cryptocurrency, the first boom and such. I didn't really understand much, although, since my young age, I've been very exposed to the computer science and such, and it always interested me. Now, in 2019, I joined OVH Cloud and became very exposed to the technology of cloud itself, and then very deep dive into the blockchain infrastructure, architecture itself, and what challenges does it solve. That desire and need to understand it turned into passion. And currently at OVH Cloud, Senior Business Development Manager and Blockchain Expert, which combines the possibility to discuss and solve challenges from companies like on the panel, and smaller and bigger, but as well doing it with love and combined with the passion to blockchain industry.
Wow. Okay, so you learned the hard way and still here to help everyone around you. Gosh, Evan, how about you? Give us an intro, please.
Absolutely, thanks. My name's Evan Hamilton. First, I want to thank the audience for being here, joining us on the webinar, and then our partners Daniel and Radu for contributing on the panel here. It's certainly important, and I think the audience wants to hear from our customer, beyond just OVH itself. I'm a key account manager based out of Canada for OVH Cloud. I've been doing that for about 3 years, and I've been working with hyperscalers and in cloud computing in general for about 8 years now. In terms of blockchain, the interest came from me from really wanting to understand my customers' businesses. They'd come to OVH, they were looking to buy infrastructure, but I wanted to know, the inner workings of how their business operated, what market factors, what drivers would be there. So as someone who likes to self-learn myself, and I think everyone in the the blockchain community can understand, it's a rabbit hole you can fall in. And I spent a lot of time, gaining my knowledge, gaining my insights and expertise on the platform, and blockchain in general. And I think internally at OVH, the growth in validation and relay demand, that was kind of an initial driver for me. But since then, worked with a lot of diverse projects within Web3 and within blockchain in general.
Cool. Well, we're going to go down that rabbit hole and hopefully come up for it by the end of this webinar. So, right now, folks, we're going to try out the polling question as polling questions. The first one, Elodie, could you put that on for the first time? And we're going to try this out. So, just as an interest in what is it that your company does in terms of an operation? Are you a creator in the front end space, in the back end space, across both? Not sure, don't know. you could have a go at answering that, and then we're going to get into that rabbit hole. I'm seeing it on. Look at that! So it's come out rather neatly there. So even Stevens, we've got some in the front end and the back end, and then we've got a whole load of don't knows and across both. So yeah, okay. So it's a fair even. So panelists, when you answer, just bear in mind the kind of audience we've got. Now, I think one of the questions have already implied this in terms of Web3. So let's kick off with a hard, thorny issue. What, in your view, Web3 means to you, the evolution, the benefits it brings. Who wants to start that off? Daniel, how about you kick us off with what do you think Web3 means to you?
What I think about Web3, I think every morning when I wake up, it's the first thing that comes into my mind. And when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, it's the last thing that goes out of my mind. There's very few times in really all of our life cycles that we get an opportunity to be part of something awesome. I missed the .com boom by this much, right? So I ended up in the Web3 space. I think for us to continue to keep building out the next version of the internet, we need to focus in and on the infrastructure piece. So you can't really necessarily say you're decentralized if you're running on, centralized services. Now that doesn't mean you can't have symbiotic relationships. Let's go back in the Wayback Time Machine, back when we had all on-prem, and along comes cloud, right? And everybody's like, what's this cloud? Where is this cloud? I don't know about this cloud. So you're telling me I'm not going to have my data? Where's my data, right? And so as they started to sunset particular infrastructure, they started to deploy on cloud, and now all of a sudden they became working together kind of in tandem. So essentially with Web3 is another piece of the pie. So we know that on-prem still exists. We know that Web2 is very robust and scalable, and we know Web3 is built more around decentralization and components like that. So I think Web3 comes down to one thing, and that's everything is about the infrastructure that makes it go.
Wow. Okay, it's about the infrastructure. Radu, what would you like to add?
Although I really like Daniel's point, and I completely agree that in Web3 we should focus a lot more on infrastructure, because basically any application is as decentralized as its most centralized point. Most of the discussion in Web3 is about owning your own data. This is something that a lot of people are talking about, and although I believe this is important, to me it's more about transparency and the choice. I think the main purpose of the blockchain technology from a philosophical standpoint is transparency, being able to participate and decide, but equally being able to see by yourself everything that happens behind the scenes, being able to follow funds, to verify votes, verify ownership, and so on. I think this is one of the biggest values brought on by Web3. I also believe that it is actually the next logical step after the technological advances brought by Web2, which allowed us to move everything online, to be flexible, always connected, with the only problem remaining the one of transparency and control. Web2 applications are really fast, easy to use, work very well, but we don't have any way to control or observe what happens behind the scenes, right? Imagine that until we had legislation put in place to force companies to actually delete user data when the user specifically asked to, no company would ever delete any account. When someone would delete their account, you would add a flag in the database marking deleted, and that was it. Web3 solves a lot of these issues. And it's true that at this point, if you want the transparency and owning your data as you have in Web3, sometimes you have to trade off some of the performance and reliability of the centralized solutions. But nonetheless, I think we are getting there slowly. And I like to believe that solutions as Beware Labs or what Daniel was talking about are helping with that by providing high performance, decentralized infrastructure and tools so that Web3 developers won't need to trade off performance for decentralization or vice versa anymore. That's my take on it. I think you're on mute, Kuldeep.
I think we've got you on mute, Kuldeep. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you there.
Yes, now we can.
Oh, okay. Anything more that you want to add?
Let me maybe
yeah.
add something if that makes sense. Guys, I heard wonderful points. Decentralization of the infrastructure, privacy, transparency, security. I think technology, from an infrastructure standpoint of view, is moving into a pace of redundancy itself. Blockchain not only solves that, but adds another layer of optimization in regards to technological stack itself. So if we focus on the database, looking at the decentralized networks of the blockchain networks itself, we are cutting the middleman here. And on some trustless blockchain networks, we see that there is no administrator. The data stays there. As Radu rightfully said, previously, it was a database. An administrator would be sitting there. If you want to delete the account, there is a red flag, that's it. No, it's not happening here. Every single thing is transparent right now. And this is why I believe this technology is going to optimize the way databases are going to operate in the future, as well as obviously all the points mentioned before.
Wow. Okay. So this is going to be a big transformational thing. Right. So we've got Web3 clear in our head. But we have two big customers. They've got some fantastically big platforms. A lot of people use those. So let me turn to you first. As owners of those blockchain companies, I've got a two-part question. What key infrastructure challenges do you face? And then what kind of solutions have you brought to bear to solve those challenges? So Radu, do you want to kick off with that?
Yeah, so basically, even as a startup or as a blockchain company, you have a lot of challenges that are not technical. You have a lot of operational challenges, like opening a simple bank account, finding a jurisdiction to do a raise and something like that. On the technical side, I think most of the challenges are presented by the novelty of the technology and the fact that you are in uncharted territory, so to speak. As an infrastructure and tooling company, we were able to see some discrepancies at a conceptual level between the idea of running decentralized services and the way public cloud works. Because the idea of public clouds, such as AWS or GCP or whatever, is that people don't need and don't want to run their own servers. While the whole concept of decentralization is based on the very fact that people will run the servers, so we can decentralize. So running blockchain infrastructure in a public cloud is very challenging in itself, and also sometimes it is too expensive to be sustainable as a business model. So for us, the biggest problem while running in the cloud was, of course, the cost. And not necessarily the actual cost of the machines, but the cost of the egress traffic. Because when running blockchain nodes, aside from the traffic you get from the actual users, from users sending requests to your platform, you also generate a whole lot of traffic from nodes that are syncing within the specific network, whether it's Ethereum, Polygon, and so on. So we managed to reduce some of those costs by ditching the standard out-of-the-box solutions, like in the AWS, it is NAT gateway, and we were running our own NAT instances. But as the number of blockchain networks that we were supporting grew, we weren't able to come up with a cost-effective solution. So in the end, we had to design and deploy our own clustering solution, and we looked for bare metal infrastructure providers that would be able to provide the SLA that we required, which was pretty demanding, and also have a very good geographical coverage, comparable or even better than a public cloud provider. This is where OVH came to the rescue, so to speak, for us. And also we discovered that, actually not discovered, we basically had the advantage that dedicated servers helps a lot with performance. For example, our throughput capabilities increased for more than 30x since moving to bare metal. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think public cloud providers take out a lot of the hurdles that are involved in deploying, maintaining a reliable service. They also speed up the go-to-market time significantly. It's just that I don't think from a cost model, they are an excellent match for blockchain infrastructure yet. So that's my opinion about it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Daniel, from Flux's point of view, what's your challenges? How did you overcome them?
I have to agree with Radu. I think one of the biggest challenges is understanding that a lot of the components, the key components of the project, don't necessarily exist. So what we found is we had to really kind of re-engineer or rebuild. You can't really launch and call yourself decentralized if you're using Google Authenticator. We had to build a decentralized two-factor authenticator. We needed a self-sovereign ID to tie Flux OS back to the node operation and basically allow people to deploy. We had to build that. So all these different components really came into play, and we really had to build them out because, again, as Radu stated earlier, you're only as decentralized as your most centralized piece. So one of the things that Flux has done for the past 5.5 years is we've focused in on solutions. So we've looked at how do we holistically get to the next level. And also make sure that if we do have a centralized component that we're using temporarily, how do we get to a decentralized component? Now, we're not maximalists, right? So we believe that Web 2 continues to thrive and grow, and Web 3 continues to thrive and grow, and they work in tandem together. And that's where partners like OVH came into play. I think you could see a unbelievable benefit between Web 2 and Web 3 as people start to load balance, much like they did with on-prem moving to cloud-based infrastructure. So I think you could see people absolutely using all three of those different platforms. And part of, as kind of Radu has said as well, because it is a novel technology and growing every day, it's very fast, it's very quick. Flux is 24/7, 365. There's no weekends, there's no days off, there's no holidays. We're constantly working on delivering the technology. And that is a challenge. It's a very high-paced, fast environment. That's why Flux is a global project. You wouldn't be able to find any time of day, 24/7, 365, where there's not somebody working on Flux. And that's been a huge success for us because we were able to adopt that. So key strategic partnerships, understanding that this isn't a siloed approach where it's just Web 2 and Web 3, but they're actually working together. Rebuilding or retooling Web 2 and moving it over. And here's the other big thing that was a challenge for us. The number one question I get about Web 3 is, how do I become a Web 3 developer? Flux created the infrastructure so that as long as you're a Web 2 developer and you can Dockerize your applications, you can move and become a Web 3 developer. So it's the educational component. And I saw somebody ask in there about, what the biggest challenges were for disruption. And that's really was the biggest challenge was education, because most people think that they can't move into Web 3 because they came up through the, Web 2 world. Maybe they know one particular, Python or JavaScript or whatever. Flux doesn't care. And that's how we get to the next level of adoption, is we bring developers, provide them awesome solutions, both Web 2 and Web 3, and we give them the ability to deploy on those platforms. So I think that's kind of where we're at.
Wow. Okay. Well, actually, you've answered a few of the questions that have come in. So that is brilliant. Look, I know as businesses, so Radu, Daniel, you've outlined those challenges. But I think we need to just take a step back and look at the wider solution trend. So let me turn to you, Omar. What kind of frameworks, what are the big trends that you're seeing in the market now?
So I just have to say that I really agree with Radu and Daniel. I think they mentioned most of the points. I'll come back to a few of them and explain in my words or give you my view on the subject. In regards to the technology itself, and I think Radu said it correctly, a vast majority of startups in the blockchain ecosystem and industry are going for a built solution rather than a bot solution, an automated solution out of the box, covering some automation and redundancy features and such as the AWS and Google's, which you mentioned, Radu, but OVH Cloud is tapping into that space as well. But then less majority or a minority of clients have enough technical expertise to build themselves, such as Beware Labs and Flux. So my take on that is that through the entrepreneurial journey, a company often starts with a prepared solution, such as the public cloud automated out-of-the-box solution. And then through the time that they are in the market, they start optimizing their costs. They acquire more technical workforce that they could actually build themselves any further the infrastructure itself. Now, looking and zooming out, what are the trends in the market? I would love to spend a minute here. If we zoom out, we would see blockchain industry as an architecture. We could see all the developers and the creators in the front-end space. So all the decentralized application providers and decentralized exchange providers and such. And then on the backend space, we could see all the networks, the blockchain networks of the words, the Ethereum and Polygons. Okay, Polygon may be a layer 2, but you get my concept. And then in the middle, if we look at in between, there are all the collaborative solutions, such as the APIs that Beware Labs is creating, all the validators. But now, what I'm really proud of today is that we have companies that are in both spaces. We have Daniel's Flux, which is tapping into enabling that front-end development of decentralized application interconnecting to networks or creating the network itself. And we have Radu's company, Beware Labs, which are creating the API toolings and the validator spaces. Now, from what I see, and not only talking to and discussing with those guys, but with a vast majority of other companies in our ecosystem, is the trend that there are companies using both public cloud services and those spoken of dedicated services Radu mentioned. And the trend that I'm seeing is that it depends on the technical ability in the workforce of the company to operate and build other on dedicated service or use public cloud automation features. Now, the challenges that I see from those companies using those public cloud infrastructure technologies and products of out of the box is that they often complain, and I'm not talking about OVH Cloud public cloud services, but I'm talking about a vast majority of other providers, is that they can't control the OpEx spend. They can't predict the billing. And as Radu said, OpEx just goes away and eats a vast majority of profits of those companies. And that's what is pushing those companies to transform. And Radu explained it very well. Now, the other thing that I want to add is that people often do not understand, and going back to Daniel's point, that a Web 2 sort of traditional cloud service provider, a cloud service provider in a traditional model can be a partner. If you try to compete with someone who's done it for 25, 30, 40 years and optimize those processes to create those cloud services, how can you succeed? It's better to partner with those companies and understand where that networking capacity comes in play for you to be able to decentralize, not only within that cloud service provider that is a partner with you, but maybe in the future to use networking solutions such as, direct connects to other cloud service providers to enable that decentralization further.
Wow. Okay. Evan, what have you got to add on this?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a different approach on the trends. Two that I've seen that I think are applicable to Web 2 that are certainly applicable to Web 3 is one is the vision of sustainability, and the other is like forthcoming regulations within industry. So from the sustainability perspective, I think financial sustainability is something that we're going to touch on a bit later, but that's like, is the solution affordable? Is the pricing predictable for your infrastructure? Because something that you may design, on a small scale, as you grow in capacity, as you grow in usage, it may grow out of control. You need to make sure that you're on top of your, financial projections, and it's going to work for your organization long term. The sustainability part I want to touch on more is the environmental. So like, what is the impact of your business on the environment? Three ways I can kind of look at that, and maybe you can challenge your hosting provider. You know, your hosting methodology is the hardware. Is that, what's the life cycle of that hardware? Is it being used for 3 years and disposed? Is it being reused for a second life? Is it being recycled through other providers? You know, what's the longevity and what's going to the landfill when it comes to the hardware perspective? When it comes to maybe energy, we look at power usage efficiency. PUE is something we use in the Web 2 term, where it's how much energy is being used to power the actual hardware, what's being used to cool it. You know, where's that energy coming from? We're looking at, is it you know, renewable energy like hydroelectric? I know in Quebec, OVH is using hydroelectric dams. We are also using wind farms for our power, but you know, based on regions, they're going to be different sources of power. Is it nuclear? Is it coal? Something to consider when you're looking at the overall environmental impact. And another one could be the water usage effectiveness. So if they're doing water cooling, or if it's part of their system internally, how much is being used, how much is being wasted, what's the impact on the environment there? For the forthcoming regulation, I think, you know, data privacy is something that we see on like the Web 2 side. For Web 3, you know, there's going to be regulation changes that are going to come, and it's going to be it could be at a country level, you know, whether it's North America, Europe, Asia, it's always going to be dynamic and changing. And I think working with the service provider that's been dealing with these laws, whether it's GDPR, you know, Law 25 in Quebec, different policies and different regulation changes, we have the means to help assist on that and to be kind of a trusted advisor. So user communities, user service providers, and work together when it comes to these future regulations that are going to be implemented.
Okay, and yes, they're looming on the horizon now, aren't they? Okay, so look, we know some of the challenges. There's questions that have come in around those challenges already and what they are technically wise. I think it'd be useful now, Daniel, you know, are there any solutions that have worked particularly well, or blind alleys which you'll avoid in future? What's your take on, you know, what to avoid and what to go for?
Well, I think the big thing is, you know, Web3, or really blockchain technology, is immediately associated with the financial world, right? Bitcoin, you know, changing the way that we bank conventionally, you know, all that kind of good stuff. That is a problem that was never looking for a solution, right? So it's always been an uphill battle. Web3 you need to move outside of that blockchain stack, and you need to move it into the standard tech stack. Now, if you're looking at electronic medical records, supply chain management, you know, yada yada, the list goes on and on. These are problems that are looking for solutions. So, you know, that I think that's the biggest thing is educating the end users who are going to deploy infrastructure. And I think Omar mentioned about the fact a delivery model, a framework. Well, we know we'll use AWS as an example. Amazon built a delivery framework. So, you know, they started with books, but now it's anything. I literally don't go to the store ever. My wife makes fun of me because I get everything on Amazon. So as they built out that framework, it didn't matter what you dropped into that framework, it was able to be delivered. And the byproduct of that was the infrastructure that had to power that. And that's what gave birth to AWS. So I think 50% of their total dollars and cents comes from their AWS platform, you know, or something like that. And that was a byproduct they created, but they created that delivery model framework. So I think there's a ton of challenges out there, and I think moving people into the next level of adoption is basically building a better mousetrap. It needs to look and feel like standard Web 2. It needs to work in tandem with Web 2. So, you know, you'll eventually be able to see deploy an application on Flux. You'll also be able to do that with OVH. So it'll be in the same place. So basically, embracing the difference of those two platforms, but also the fact that they work so well together, I think that's the big thing. And it'll also open up the door for people to get comfortable with using, I mean, blockchain is still a scary word, right? Even Web3 is kind of a scary word. But they've done these things in the past. They've came up through the, you know, the ranks working with cloud compute. And all it is another version of cloud compute, and it helps augment each other. So I think those are some of the cool things we're really looking at.
Oh, wow. Okay. Bradley, what's your advice to the listeners?
I would like to tailor my advice to be focused more on the startup owners, people that are trying to build within the Web3 space. So my advice is that you should really pay attention on the current context and then make your decisions accordingly, because the decision you should make as a startup will be different whether you're in a bull market and a bear market. Frankly, I prefer the bear market for building because it allows you to take your time to pay a closer attention to doing things right. But in the same time, it makes sense that when you are in a bull market, you want to take advantage of the liquidity on the market. So at that point, you want to get to the market fast. That might get you into all sorts of problems later. But if you manage to achieve your goal of getting the capital you need to bring the solution to, I don't know, the next million to 2 million users, that's okay. So everything boils down to the buy versus build dilemma. And this is reiterating Omar's point earlier. Uh, Basically, if you're a product builder, like you're building a decentralized app, being a lending protocol, game, DEX, whatever, one of the decisions you'll need to make is like whether you buy or you run your own infrastructure. In this case, you should spend some time seriously thinking at the particularities that would make it difficult for you to find a provider, whether it makes sense to eliminate some of those particularities, or if the cost of getting blockchain access compensates for getting a subscription. So I strongly believe that if there's already a service available, you can buy, which will get you to the market faster and eliminate part of your responsibility when it comes to SLAs and so on. You should give it some consideration. Otherwise, you should pay closer attention if you need to build it by yourself, because the more complex the solution is, usually it requires a custom development. So in our case, we started the company at the beginning of the bull market. So we we always started buying and ended up building. So we used out of the box proxy solutions that were either not scalable or not customizable enough or too expensive. We used a lot of out of the box public cloud solutions, ended up building our own versions afterwards. So my lessons learned from this is that you should pay closer attention to scalability and costs from the beginning. And it doesn't hurt to think big, like what it will cost me if I reach 1 million users? How about when I get to 20 million users? Will it still work? Or will I be able to have a successful business model there? So make a decision only after thinking about that, but also consider the current context, because sometimes if you take the time to do things exactly right, you might lose the chance to get it to the market in time. And in other times, it's the vice versa. If you have the time, do it right from the beginning. So basically, you should pay attention to the context always.
Pick and choose your battles. Okay. Now, a very specific question has come in, and since you're talking about it at the moment, Radu, there's a question that's coming for you that says, why did you choose OVH? What are the advantages in using OVH over other providers? So give us your take on that for
Yeah, I think I kind of gave of an answer in one of my interventions earlier. But basically, when we decided that we need to create our own clustering solution and migrate out of the public cloud for basically to be sustainable and reduce the costs in order to have an efficient business model, we looked into the market and we were trying to get a provider that could offer us the SLA that we required and have the geographical distribution that we required, because basically our Blast, our API solution, is using a custom proxy that allows us to route requests from their origin to the closest point of presence, thus reducing the latency and giving us a really good response time. So, but enabled to route requests to the closest point of presence, you had to have points of presence all over the world. So OVH was really helpful with that. So when we chose based on the offering in terms of geographical distribution and the SLA levels. And also there was a really good communication in the beginning. I think that was also important. And I think that's Omar's merit most of. So basically it was like very good support, very transparent, and it was easy. It was just easy to work with you guys. So I think that was another factor that was important for us.
Cool. Okay. Daniel, you want to add anything as to why you're working with OVH?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the fact that we're disruptive technology, and disruptive technology needs partners that are forward thinking. So essentially, as we started traversing the Web2 space and looking for logical partners, the one that stood out immediately and the one that was most responsive was OVH. They were willing to stop what they were doing to listen to us. They understood that the future was moving forward very quickly. They wanted to be part of that. And I think that's very forward thinking, and that's all through their leadership all the way down to their team. I've had a great experience with them across the board. And I think that's really what pushes us to the next level of adoption. You know, we see all these layoffs, we see all these downsides. The technology demands don't decrease because they have less employees, right? They're going to need solid infrastructure and partners that are going to be able to do that. And I think that's where OVH and Flux really kind of hit it off. And I mean, honestly, just overall, it's a really solid platform.
Excellent. Okay. So I'll tell you what, I think I'm going to come to you now, Evan. We've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about public-private, and we know how it impacts on margins. Radu's talked about the business cases and so forth. So just talk us through the latest thinking on financial strategy, how CapEx works with OpEx, managed service versus outsourcing. Try and make sense for our listeners about all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I think there's a lot of different, I guess, solutions, products that can come in place into, what you implement into your financial strategy or financial control. We've talked about, public cloud, as I mentioned, where you can find within OVH and within, other hyperscalers and providers around the world. Bare metal servers is kind of a trend that we've been seeing, internally at OVH, which has been extremely popular, providing, control, both on a technical level and a financial level, and price predictability. That's been important. I think predicting costs when you're building out any sort of infrastructure is extremely important. On the technical side, your compute, your storage, your ingress, egress, the networking in general. How is that going to play out in the long term? If you grow as a platform or as a solution, those costs may elevate and become exponential. Whether it's the NAT example that Radu provided, there's different sort of situations where you need to be in control of everything that's going to come forward on a financial standpoint. For capital expenditure versus OpEx there, I look at kind of young enterprises as an example within the blockchain industry is something we see a lot. Startups and even well-funded organizations focusing on kind of CapEx allows you to focus your business to keep it dynamic. If you need to make changes, if you need to expand rapidly, if you need to downgrade based on current market trends, you need to change your deployment. Going with a service provider or having kind of a CapEx model, an OpEx model, will allow you to be a little more dynamic and make those changes. A CapEx model, you're kind of fixed in place. If it's an on-premise deployment of a lot of servers or something like that, you might have a situation where your product changes, your hosting needs change, and you're not able to be dynamic and shift in that way, and you're going to be held on to it, and you're not going to be able to scale in that regard. I think an example that I got, working with the Solana network, the hardware validation requirements are often changing. Sometimes, your hardware you have in place may become obsolete within a matter of months, and you could be stuck with hardware. If you're working with a service provider, someone like OVH Cloud, you have the option to, to continue to expand and, trade in that hardware to something new because you're on a flexible plan, renting that out on a monthly basis. You're not fixed in. So if you need to change, you can, whether it's the entire hosting model, your business in general. I think it's a little more adaptive and a little more receptive for young enterprises, and particularly companies starting out in the Web3, the blockchain ecosphere.
Oh wow! Okay, and in the process, Evan, you've actually answered a few of the questions that have come in, so that was a great answer. Omar, what would you like to add?
Maybe I'll do the same. I just wanted to add to a point that I obviously agree with Evan. OpEx versus CapEx. We are facing and we are experiencing and being part of that revolution, technological revolution where Web3 is coming to life. With that said, means young entrepreneurs are building their enterprises. So a lot of startups and scale-ups are playing in the game as well at the moment. Now, if we look at that, OpEx is not only giving you the possibility to grow faster because you're paying monthly expenditure rather than investing millions of dollars into their own on-premise, buying the kit that no one knows if the scale up or startup's idea is going to be sustainable enough to reach that level of users, which Beware Labs were able to do, and predicting, you know, if we reach 1 million or 20 million users, what's then? But often companies are scared. So OpEx based model can help you not only be more dynamic, as Evan said, but estimate a numbers of users and scale within the control of the user and user base. Now, something that I'm seeing as a trend as well is those multi-product cloud scenarios, which is not often spoken about. So someone that is building the infrastructure on a dedicated server and building that, but then within spikes of need of scalability, they're using the public cloud resources on an hourly, monthly, on an hourly even billing models to reach that level, and then obviously the long-term longevity and the goal of that scenario and strategy would be to retain and control all the build. Now, one thing that comes into my mind is, what can a cloud service provider offer? There is many cloud service providers out there. So Radu spoke about some of those possibilities and gains that they experience, and I'm really thrilled with OVH Cloud. Now, very often, I like to say a win-win scenario is what we should look at here. A win-win scenario because we have to win in some sort of innovation for our company as a traditional cloud service provider, but that company, that scale up, that startup, that maybe even mature blockchain company that comes within to work with us in the ecosystem has to win as well. Now, a few things is that we offer an ecosystem. It's not only about creating the project or sourcing the solution, but how can we take a step forward? How can we co-work on marketing activities? How can we create webinars? How can we get the solution and tell to the world, yes, we are disrupting the market. Yes, we are working together. Yes, we are working hand to hand. We're proud of it. How can we build a community in which we can support startups, for example, with financing some of their deployments in the public cloud? For example, someone wants to try if the solution is right, if the ecosystem, if the partnership and the advice that we will be committed to giving is right. That's what OVH Cloud will do. And I think it's very important to understand that it's not only about finding the right partner, but a partner that has passion to co-create with you and respect you at the same level, and can source the need of the infrastructure at a low price and competitiveness, but as well is committed to working with you to unlock any challenges that comes into your way, from regulation standpoint, from educational standpoint. As Daniel said, it's going to be a massive point. I'll cut it at that. I have much more to say.
I can feel the passion coming through. Look, we've started talking about ecosystems. So I mean, you can't separate the two. Yeah. You talk about blockchain, you got to mention ecosystems. I think, Daniel, the two are linked. What's your take on the ecosystem and how you can, how they add to the success of a blockchain business?
Yeah, I think we're at a very unique time right now because I think we're finally starting to see some interchain operability. The holy grail of blockchain is interchain operability. Having these siloed projects that are basically here, there, and everywhere and not working together just doesn't work. So one of the things that Flux did specifically was our parallel assets. So we're on 8 other chains. 10 it'll be 10 here by the end of the year. And it allows us to work in these different ecosystems. And not only that, it's starting to train the blockchain-based ecosystems to utilize logical partners. So instead of everybody creates, I mean, what big thing in blockchain at one point in time is a fork of a fork of a fork. Yeah, I got this idea. We're going to do this, do that. They're starting to get to the point where they're really looking at solving solutions and understanding that they can't build it all themselves. So like with Flux, we partner with logical partners. We always said we don't have competition, we have opportunity. Opportunities to continue to grow, much like what Omar was saying specifically around these different areas. So I think interchain operability is taking your ecosystem and moving it out to other ecosystems to allow them to participate. If you go back 5 years, interchain operability wasn't even something on the radar. People hadn't even thought about that yet. They were just trying to create their own blockchains. And now we've already started seeing projects like Flux, and so there's some other projects out there doing it as well, where we're expanding this creep into other areas. And now you're starting to see it expand outside of blockchain and bring in trusted partners in the Web2 space as well. So I think the ecosystem becomes this lake essentially where everybody kind of it overflows into, and I think that's how we have success with both the Web 2 and Web 3.
Oh, I like that. I like it. The lake analogy. Radu, anything more to add on that?
Yes. Basically, we at Buer Labs discovered the need of creating an entire tooling and development ecosystem pretty early on. At the beginning, we were just joining testnets for different blockchains to see what they're all about, seeing about their technical expertise, basically doing some due diligence to see if they are worth adding to the platform or not. But then we soon discovered that for the developers, in order to have the chance and the possibilities to bring real good solutions to the market, they need more than just access to the blockchain. They need an entire development ecosystem that would include all sorts of stuff like faucets, like snapshots, like indexing infrastructure. So we saw this as a opportunity for Buer Labs, and we thought that any blockchain that needs to increase its adoption will need to offer all this out of the since the beginning in order to attract all the developers or to attract developers to their specific ecosystem. So basically, this is what we are trying to help with on the long run. And I also think it's important what Daniel said, that we are doing really good steps towards blockchain interoperability, and that most of our customers, we already see that are not focusing on only one specific chains, but most of our requests right now are coming from companies that already built on multiple blockchains in the same time. We also see a lot of projects that try to bring interoperability not only between similar blockchains, but also between different ecosystems altogether. We see companies that want to bring EVM to Aptos. We see companies that brought EVM to the Polkadot ecosystem, or interoperability between Cosmos and EVM. And I think that should be actually the future. All blockchains being interoperable and specializing on different tasks, and basically focusing on the required infrastructure to bring developers into the blockchains and onboard actual users that are not early adopters, that like to just use applications, don't care how they work. Simply make it easy enough for everyone to use, and you'll get all the users into the Web3. I think that's the way to go.
Okay, Evan, what's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I love the comments from Daniel and Radu. I think, you know, the focus on developing together, whether it's chains within protocols, you know, making it an ecosystem overall. From where I can speak from, I think Omar as well, it's, you know, maybe the hosting provider standpoint of building together as well, whether it's co-marketing activities, of, you know, producing case studies to show the market of like what can be done, what are challenges that are faced, how are they overcome, That's something that we're trying to work on. It can be webinars to share, the ideas, the challenges, the wins that, companies have really faced. It can be building out, in-person events. It can be working on, maybe our startup program that we have internally and providers have, where you can give, funding, you can give expertise, and you can share your insights on, what companies have faced when they're trying to, get started, or they're trying to scale up overall. So I think those are two elements. And then maybe just, openness. I think the Web3 community is, its own self-adopter. It's working together. It's participating on forums. It's, participating on these discussions, whether, online or in person. I think that goes a long way to build up the ecosystem together.
Wow. Okay. Look, we've covered an awful lot, and we've only just started to unpack all of the elements, but we're on the hour. So if I was to ask each of you one tip that you would give our listeners, what would it be? Radu, do you want to kick us off? You might be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Well, my tip would be to, I mean, within an industry such as Web3, you always have to keep your options open. Maybe you start with building something that until you get it to the market might be obsolete. So you basically have to keep your eyes open, pivot as many times as you can, and basically try not to get too invested into your original idea, because that will most likely change within the Web3. I mean, if you look in Web3, 3 weeks is already ages. So basically, you have to keep your mind open and be very flexible and ready to pivot at any time. That's my advice.
Ready to pivot. Daniel, what's yours?
I got to agree with Radu there. And I think if I had to give my advice, I'd say that it's about education. So take the time to really dig into, different projects, look at different opportunities. If you're a developer, you can definitely develop on Web3, and you can definitely use the knowledge that you've gained kind of coming up through the ranks to do so. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding this is a disruptive technology, that it's always iterating and always changing. It's 24/7, 365, and don't feel intimidated. Don't let the buzzwords confuse you. Metaverse, DeFi, fintech, whatever it is, whatever the soup du jour is. Understand that when it comes down to brass tacks, it's really about how you deliver those products. So it's about infrastructure. So that's my biggest thing, is just educate yourself and really start to learn.
Wow. Okay. Like that. Evan, what's yours?
I think from my side, I would say focus on, I guess, your core competency, like whatever your team is and your organization is good at. Focus on, build that out. Leverage your network, leverage, the information that's available online to handle the rest. I think Radu mentioned, if there's people that love building infrastructure, there's people that love software development. There's a part for everyone in there, and I think there's always an opportunity to work together and leverage each other while focusing on your core competency, building out what your business does best.
Cool. Okay, Omar, finish us off.
Will do. Thank you very much. I just want to say one thing. Throughout the years that I've been working at OVH Cloud and had the pleasure to work with really disrupting companies, really innovative. I have to say that people that enable and let themselves get flown by a vision, but agile vision. So they are agile in their vision, are the winners. Now, in regards to a quote, a good hockey player plays where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is right now. And I think this is blockchain. At the moment, we're experiencing that. To discuss that even more, we as OVH Cloud, and that was a very visible when we were talking about ecosystems. Myself and Evan were talking about business ecosystems, about enabling kind of marketing activities on how to grow a already set it scale up startup to a next level, whether Daniel and Radu, although they are mature, they're focusing on the technological aspects. And this is what brings balance. So my advice would be, guys, do not hesitate to contact us. One of the standpoints of OVH Cloud is innovation for freedom. We really love innovative companies. We have startup programs to help you, but as well, the core beliefs of OVH Clouds, or one of many core beliefs, is that we're open, we're transparent, and therefore we would love to understand what's your project, where do you want to stand, and trust us in a way. Trust us in a way for an advice, because all we want to be is your trusted advisors in the ecosystem.
Cool. Okay, trust. It's all about trust, obviously, for everybody in the ecosystem. Look, we're over time, so just a really big thanks for all the panelists, Radu, Daniel, Omar, Evan. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've got through an awful lot, and we've only just started unpacking all of these elements. Just as a good thing for everybody else, this discussion has been recorded, so you'll be sent an email by Elodie, who's the events manager. That'll signpost where that recording is in case you want to listen to it again, and hopefully share with your colleagues. That email will also contain links for some additional resources, including some case studies that we'll be talking about, and the Beware Labs, etc. So have a look at those. Obviously, do get in touch if you've got any projects you'd like to discuss and whether we can help you in any way. And the final thing I'd like to say is we value your feedback. So take a minute to give us your feedback. There's going to be a word cloud that Elodie will now put up on the screen, and it'll help us to make sure that future discussions are elements that'll help you actually make use of all of these webinars. So, just get stuck in with that word cloud. Give us those top 2 or 3 words that you think really stick out as a result of this webinar. Just remains for me to say a really big thanks to all of you for listening today. Have a lovely evening and an enjoyable Easter when you get there in a couple of weeks' time. Goodbye.